All right, so get ready, because today we're diving into a world where spirituality um, kind of takes a turn into some pretty murky waters.
Mm.
We're going to be talking about Siddhaswarupananda Paramahamsa.
Better known as Chris Butler.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah.
And the Science of Identity Foundation, or SIF,
Yeah.
that he established.
And what makes this deep dive really interesting is the rivalry between Butler's followers and another group within the same tradition.
Got it.
The Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition. And specifically, we're looking at the followers of Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja and the Gaudiya math represented by the International Pure Bhakti Yoga Society.
So, like, we're talking almost like a family feud,
Yes.
but with, like, spiritual enlightenment at stake.
Exactly.
And to make it even more complicated, there are claims that Butler's group has strayed from the traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava path.
Yeah, there are lots of accusations of deviations from that.
So to make sense of all of this, we're going to be looking at it through the lens of Vaishnava etiquette.
That's going to be really helpful.
Yeah, which is basically like a spiritual rule book, you know,
It is.
for how devotees are supposed to, conduct themselves and all that.
Exactly.
And the sources that we have today are a real mixed bag.
Yeah, a very interesting set of sources.
We have court documents.
Oh, wow.
We have forum discussions online. We even have some stories from former SIF members and then some investigative reports.
That's a very diverse collection of sources.
Exactly. So to start off, let's just paint a picture of these two main figures that we're going to be talking about. Chris Butler and Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja.
Okay.
Both of them claim to represent the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition within Hinduism.
Right.
But how did their approaches differ?
So I think a letter from Prema Priyojandath Brahmachari, a follower of Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja, really gives us some insight into the different beliefs and practices of these two groups.
Oh, right.
And this letter delves into the concepts of Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti.
Ooh, break those down for me.
Yeah, so imagine you're trying to reach a destination. Spiritual enlightenment. Vaidhi Bhakti is like following a well-marked trail. You know, you're adhering to the rules. Wow. It's very methodical, step by step.
Got it. So Raganuga Bhakti would be like the opposite of that.
Yeah, Raganuga Bhakti is more like you're forging your own path, right?
Okay.
It's very spontaneous. You're driven by this longing for the divine.
I see. So where do Butler's followers and Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja's followers stand on these two different paths?
Well, the letter suggests that Butler's followers lean more towards Vaidhi Bhakti.
So more structured.
More structured emphasis on rules.
Okay.
While Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja's followers were more aligned with Raganuga Bhakti.
More spontaneous, more heart-centered.
Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Okay. And was this difference in belief, like, was that a source of tension between the two groups?
Absolutely. This philosophical divergence was a major contributing factor to the conflicts that arose. For instance, the letter even mentions accusations of agitation against Mahabhava Dasa, a follower of Bhaktivedanta Narayana Maharaja by Butler's group.
Oh, wow.
They even demanded his reinicitation, which is basically like questioning his legitimacy.
Like they're saying he needs to start over.
Yeah, like you're not really a true follower.
Whoa, that's pretty intense.
It is.
It seems like this clash goes way beyond just like philosophical differences.
It does, and I think one of the things that we're going to see is critics argue that Butler's group, SIF, deviated in significant ways from the traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava system.
All right, so let's get into these deviations.
Okay.
What exactly we're talking about?
So one major point of contention is SIF's interpretation of Varnashrama Dharma, which is the traditional social and spiritual system within Hinduism. And critics allege that SIF really distorted this system to consolidate their control over followers.
So they're saying instead of promoting spiritual growth and equality, that they're using this system to create like a power dynamic that benefits their leadership.
That's the essence of the argument, yeah.
Right.
And I think to really understand the gravity of this, we need to consider it in light of Vaishnava etiquette.
Okay, so how do SIF's actions measure up against that spiritual rulebook?
Well, one of the fundamental principles of Vaishnava etiquette is honesty.
Okay.
And so there are accusations of financial misconduct within SIF.
Wait, hold on.
Yeah.
We're talking about financial misconduct in a spiritual organization.
Yeah, and specifically there's a connection to this company called QNet.
Tell me more about this QNet connection.
We'll dive deeper into it later, but it's important to note that this alleged involvement contradicts this principle of honesty.
God, it sounds like we're just scratching the surface of something pretty,
Yeah, complex and potentially troubling.
Yeah. Okay, so let's dive deeper into these accusations against SIF
Let's do it.
and see how they hold up against this idea of Vaishnava etiquette.
And as we explore further, just remember that this deep dive is about understanding this conflict.
Yes.
And encouraging you to think critically about what you hear.
I love it.
Think for yourself.
Think for yourself. That's what we're all about.
Exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so we're seeing some cracks in this spiritual facade of SIF.
Right.
But before we go too much further, I'm curious about this whole concept of Vaishnava etiquette.
Okay.
Like, what are some of the other principles and how do they apply here?
Well, along with honesty, Vaishnava etiquette really stresses nonviolence, both physically and emotionally.
Makes sense.
Treating all beings with respect and compassion,
Yeah.
even those you disagree with.
Right. But some of the things that we've heard so far, like this demand for reinicitation,
Right.
these accusations of distorted teachings, I mean, that doesn't really sound very peaceful or loving.
No, it doesn't. And this is where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Because when we look at the experiences of former SIF members, a very different picture emerges.
Okay. I'm ready to hear these experiences.
Yeah, so a lot of them describe this environment of intense psychological pressure within SIF. They talk about being manipulated, controlled, and even verbally abused by Butler and his inner circle.
That's really heavy stuff.
It is.
It really is.
It's a far cry from the image that they present.
Yeah. It doesn't sound like this very harmonious spiritual community.
Exactly. And they go on to allege that SIF actively discouraged any sort of critical thinking or questioning of Butler's authority.
That's disturbing.
It is.
It sounds like the type of environment where people can lose themselves and just become like totally dependent on the group.
Yeah, and that's a common theme you see in people who leave high control groups.
Yeah.
Often described feeling really isolated from their support systems and only having the group to rely on.
Yeah.
So their worldview becomes very limited.
Yeah.
And in SIF's case, this control went even beyond just beliefs and behaviors.
It extended to personal lives,
Okay.
including their finances.
Oh, okay. So this is where the QAnt situation comes back in.
Exactly. And things take a turn here.
Okay.
So remind me again, what's the connection between SIF and this multi-level marketing company?
Yeah.
So a prominent figure within SIF, Alan Tibby, also known as Acharya Das, was heavily involved in QAnt.
Okay.
And court documents allege that he actually conspired with Vijay Eswaran, QAnt's founder, in money laundering and running this illegal pyramid scheme.
Whoa, hold on. So you have a spiritual leader tied up in international financial scandals.
Yeah.
How does SIF reconcile that with their teachings about detachment from material wealth?
Right. And that's a question that a lot of critics have raised.
Yeah.
And the answer is not very clear.
Yeah.
Some former SIF members allege that the organization actually used its influence to pressure people into joining QAnt, promising them financial freedom, So there's this huge conflict between their message of simplicity and detachment and the reality of their leaders' involvement in this company.
Exactly. And there are also ethical concerns surrounding QAnt.
Okay.
That go beyond money.
Right.
The company has faced allegations of exploiting its members.
Yeah.
Many of whom lose money.
It's like this ultimate betrayal.
Yeah.
Like people are seeking guidance, community.
Right.
And they get caught up in this web of deception.
It really is.
It's a tough situation.
And it raises questions about the true motivations of the leadership.
Okay, so we have these allegations of financial misconduct, psychological manipulation, and, this twisting of traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava teachings.
Right.
It's a lot.
It's a lot to process.
What was the impact of all of this on SIF's followers?
Well, like we mentioned, there are people who have left and are now sharing their experiences.
Right.
But I think what's even more telling is how the people who remained within the organization reacted.
What do you mean?
So many SIF devotees just staunchly defend Butler and the organization against all of these accusations. They just dismiss the critics as disgruntled ex-members,
Right.
who just wanted to cause trouble.
Yeah.
And they maintain that SIF is a legitimate spiritual path.
Okay.
And that Butler is a genuine guru.
So you have this stark divide, right?
Yes.
You have former members claiming abuse and manipulation, and then current members expressing unwavering faith and loyalty.
It's a very us versus them mentality, which is a hallmark of groups that have cult-like characteristics.
It makes you wonder how people can remain, so devoted in the face of such serious accusations?
Right, and it's a complex issue. There are so many factors at play.
Oh.
Some people might genuinely find the teachings on meditation and yoga beneficial.
Okay.
Others might value the community and that sense of belonging.
Uh-huh.
And some might just be deeply attached to Butler as a charismatic leader.
Yeah. It's a very complex situation.
It is.
I'm curious, aside from the allegations of financial and psychological abuse, what about these claims that SIF deviated from the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition?
Okay, well, one area where their interpretation differs is their approach to initiation.
Okay, remind me, what is the significance of initiation in this tradition?
Yeah, so in traditional Gaudiya Vaishnavism, Diksha is a sacred ritual that marks the acceptance of a disciple by a guru.
Okay.
It's a pivotal step on the path.
Mm-hmm.
But it's usually gradual.
Oh.
There's a period of study, service, development of the guru-disciple relationship.
So how is SIF's approach different?
Critics argue that they put a huge emphasis on the formal initiation.
Okay.
Almost encouraging it very soon after someone joins.
That seems rushed.
It does, right?
Yeah.
And some former members claim that they use it as a way to control people to make them feel obligated to obey.
So it's less about genuine spiritual development and more about establishing this power over people.
That's the accusation.
So it sounds like their approach to spirituality raises a lot of questions.
It does.
On the one hand, they say they're following the Gaudiya Vaishnava path.
Right.
But on the other hand, their practices seem to contradict so many of the core principles.
It's confusing.
It is. It's very confusing. So we've covered a lot today.
We have.
We've talked about alleged financial misconduct, psychological manipulation, deviations from traditional teachings.
Yep.
What else is there?
Well, there's one more piece to this puzzle that adds another layer of complexity.
Right.
And that is the connection between SIF and a prominent political figure, Tulsi Gabbard.
Wait, Tulsi Gabbard, the former congresswoman.
Yes.
What's her connection to SIF?
Well, her family has deep ties to SIF.
Okay.
Her parents, Mike and Carol Gabbard, were early followers of Chris Butler.
So this isn't just a spiritual family feud anymore.
Right. It's spilling over into politics.
Okay, so tell me more about her involvement.
Well, Gabbard identifies as a Hindu
Uh-huh.
and has spoken about her spiritual beliefs. Okay.
But her connection to SIF during her political career became really controversial.
Why was that?
So critics pointed out these inconsistencies between her political stances and some of the teachings of SIF.
Okay.
Particularly on things like homosexuality and abortion.
Got it. So, SIF has this very conservative stance.
Right.
And then she was expressing more liberal views.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is.
So how did she address those inconsistencies?
Well, she defended herself by saying that her personal beliefs had evolved.
Okay.
And that she separated her faith from her political decisions.
Okay.
But critics argued that her connection raised questions about potential influence.
Yeah, it's a tricky situation.
It is.
We have religious freedom.
Right.
But there's also this concern when those beliefs clash with the values of her constituents.
Exactly.
It's tough.
It highlights the challenges of navigating faith and politics in a pluralistic society.
It really does. And this wasn't the only instance where her connection to SIF sparked controversy, right? Right. So her defense of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, and leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is known for its Hindu nationalist agenda, also drew criticism. Especially because there were concerns about religious intolerance in India under his leadership.
Right.
So again, more questions about her alignment with SIF.
So it seems like her political career really became this battleground for trying to reconcile her personal faith and her public image and political expediency.
Yeah, it was a lot to juggle.
It sounds like it. Okay.
And it serves as a cautionary tale about spiritual organizations getting entangled with politics. It's risky.
So we've explored these controversies surrounding Chris Butler and SIF, from cult-like practices, financial misconduct, deviations from the traditional teaching, political entanglements. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a story filled with contradictions and a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of doing these deep dives, right? It's about exploring those gray areas,
Challenging our assumptions.
Yeah.
Thinking critically.
And speaking of conclusions, as we wrap up this deep dive into SIF, I'm left with this question. What are the broader implications of a spiritual movement gaining political influence?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
It raises concerns about, a particular ideology being used to shape public policy that might not benefit everyone.
Right, or even infringe on people's rights.
Exactly, and it highlights the importance of transparency and accountability in both the spiritual and political realms.
It's a reminder that we should always be questioning
Always.
The motivations of people in power.
Yes.
Whether they're spiritual leaders or politicians.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
I think so.
We've journeyed through this world of SIF,
It's been fascinating.
It's a really fascinating story.
It is.
And as always, the journey doesn't end here.
Keep researching, keep questioning.
Keep exploring, keep those minds open.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Okay, so let's unpack this whole Gabbard connection.
Yeah.
It's crazy how this spiritual movement, SIF, with all its baggage, could get so tied up in politics.
Yeah, it really is interesting how it all unfolded. So Gabbard's rise, she became the first Hindu member of Congress.
Right.
But her connection to SIF wasn't really public knowledge initially.
Yeah.
Which led to some accusations that she was being deceptive.
Hiding her true beliefs.
Exactly.
Okay, so why was this connection to SIF such a big deal? Why did it matter so much in politics?
Well, there were investigative reports that came out highlighting this conflict between her political positions and some of SIF's teachings, especially on sensitive issues like, homosexuality and abortion.
Okay, so we have SIF with this super conservative stance.
Right.
And then she's expressing more liberal views.
Exactly.
How did she address that? How did she explain that?
Well, she said that her personal beliefs evolved over time.
Okay.
And that she believed in separating her faith from her political decisions.
Right.
But critics argued that this connection to SIF raised questions about undue influence.
Were her views really her views?
Exactly. It's tricky. It is tricky. You have religious freedom on the one hand, but then on the other hand, you have these concerns about when those beliefs might clash with the values of her constituents.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is, and it really highlights the challenges of navigating faith and politics.
Especially in such a diverse society.
Exactly.
And this wasn't the only time her connection to SIF caused controversy.
Right, so her defense of Narendra Modi, the Prime Minister of India, who's the leader of the Bharatiya Janata Party, which is known for its Hindu nationalist agenda.
Okay, yeah.
And also drew a lot of criticism.
Yeah, especially with all the concerns about religious intolerance in India.
Exactly.
So it's like her political career became this battleground between her personal faith and what she was saying publicly and just this whole idea of perception.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow, we've really gone through it all, haven't we?
We have.
We've explored these controversies surrounding Chris Butler and SIF, from accusations of cult-like practices, financial misconduct, deviations from these traditional teachings, political entanglements. It's a lot.
It's a lot. It's a very nuanced and complex story.
And I think that's what makes these deep dives so interesting, right? It's about exploring the gray areas,
Challenging our assumptions.
Yeah, thinking critically.
Exactly.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into SIF, I think it's important to keep in mind the broader implications of spiritual movements gaining political influence.
Right, something to really think about.
Because it raises concerns about how certain ideologies can shape public policy.
Yeah, and who those policies benefit.
And it highlights the importance of being transparent.
Right.
And being accountable.
Yeah.
Both in the spiritual realm and in the political realm.
Absolutely.
So no matter who's in charge, whether it's a spiritual leader or a politician, we should always be questioning their motivations.
Yes. Critical thinking is so important.
Well, we covered so much ground today.
It's been a great deep dive.
This world of SIF is so fascinating.
It is.
And as always, this is just the beginning,
Boy, keep researching, keep learning.
Keep exploring, keep asking questions.
Exactly.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of SIF.